let's take a closer look at the matric exam rewrite decision that was overturned this afternoon. The judge slamming as a shambles the way the decision was made, saying it was unlawful and procedurally irregular. I'm joined now by Professor Mary Metcalfe, of course, a teacher for many years, a former education MEC here in Gauteng, and now senior research associate at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thanks very much for your time. What did you make of the judgment? And I know that you have read it.
Yes, Sally, it's a very critical judgment, and I think it's a very good example for everyone in decision-making to be very clear what is the legal authority they have to make decisions, what processes must be followed, and what is the rational basis that can be defended in a court of law.
And it's interesting because the judge also found that it's not just that the process was wrong, and he was questioning how the DG and the minister didn't actually work together in terms of making this decision. That's my understanding of a quick read. That Umalusi should never really have been involved at this stage. And he describes the process of making the decision as a shambles. But more than that, he also says at the time of compiling his judgment, only 195 pupils had been found to have cheated. Now, we know that with the prevalence of social media, it could be far larger than that. But I think he made the point that even if it was 100 times more than that, it would still only be 6% of the matric pupils compromised. And he says even then, he still didn't think it would have been the right decision to make. But the question, of course, is what does Umalusi do now? He found Umalusi was premature in saying, well, we're not going to endorse this. He said they had no right to say that at this stage.
To be fair, Sally, as critical as the judgment is and as much as we can learn from it, these decisions were taken very quickly because of the threat of the sense that this could be viral. Even in haste, we need to make sure that we follow procedures. Now, the relationship between the DBE and Umalusi is that DBE is the examining body and Umalusi is the quality assurance body. And Umalusi is tasked by law to ensure that the matric results are free of irregularity. Now, the question in this rapidly moving situation of at what point do you say it's free of irregularity, I think made decision-making far too quick, far too hasty, and this is what we've now learned. I think for me the real question going forward is what can be done to protect the integrity, the credibility, the validity of this year's 2020 maths and science result. What it seems to me to be is that the court is directing that the identified learners, their papers have to be kept aside, that the ongoing investigations must identify any other learners who've had access, that the marking process and the standardization should further identify. And for the public concern, it must be that Umalusi and the DBE take those necessary steps, because far and beyond the issue of the inconvenience, in the long term, it's for the protection of learners that we should be able to stand by the credibility of these results, and that's what Umalusi and the DBE will have to focus on now.
We know that Umalusi has said that they're going to be issuing a media release probably in the next half an hour or so, so we're not quite sure how they're going to respond to today's court decision. But let's say they come out and say, you know what, we're not going to certify the maths and science exams. We're just not comfortable. We think it will put the entire year at risk. Then what happens?
That is a difficult question, because it would mean that then if they stand by their decision to say we are not trusting because we fear the viral nature of this leak, it would mean that they would need to provide the public, possibly the courts, with a very clear basis for that decision. If that was tested legally, then they would need to be able to defend that decision. And if they successfully defended the decision it would mean that the papers would be cancelled and all learners would have to rewrite at some stage, which I think is precisely the fear that they were trying to avoid that eventuality.
Which I suppose explains why they were trying to do this quickly, I think in a year of so many delays, so much uncertainty. But, you know, the old adage, more haste, less speed. Okay, so what happens now? I mean, I would imagine that they've identified 195 kids who they're pretty sure cheated. You are a teacher, you've got many years' experience. How easy is it to see, when you mark a paper, if a pupil has cheated? Can you pick it up from the way a pupil has answered?
Well, as a teacher, you know your learners. So when somebody does extraordinarily well, you begin to ask questions. You're either delighted that they've done so well, or you feel you must investigate. Now, the system doesn't know every learner, but they do have a record of the continuous assessment results, the paper one results. They have a sense of how learners at that school have performed over time. So the standardization and marking process, there will be a very careful look for inconsistencies, and I think that Umalosi will then take decisions based on what they discover. They don't know every learner, but they have the records.
So they now have to drill into all those papers and try and spot the suspicious ones. And Professor Mary Metcalfe, thank you so much for your time.